I think we had a lot of good discussion about the issue of parenting in view of the gospel. I think it had been things that I would have loved to have heard before I started parenting, that's for sure. And when I was sharing before, something that really touched my heart deeply when we got into the discovery of the difference between the substance of faith and the fact there is no substance on this earth, that the only real substance there is faith. And you know, in our natural thinking, in what even science would have told us in times past, before they ever admitted that there is no substance in substance, they would have said that this world is substance and faith has no substance. And it's just the opposite way around. Is anybody shocked that it's just the opposite way around?
That's a problem.
That this, really, there is no substance in any of this at all. And that the true substance is faith itself. Now, faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. So we want to continue in the discussing the psychology of the gospel. How does this affect us? After the heart and mind, I mean, I know that most of us had almost an immediate change come to the soul to some degree from the very first time that you heard any element of the gospel. Something began to change. It was like Kate's song, there's something going on in her head. And something does start happening in your head. It's also, let me say this, it really is wonderfully important to know what part of you the gospel is affecting. It affects the way you think. And that way of thinking is the power of God. And I don't think I could ever emphasize that enough, is that we're actually dealing with a way of thinking that is the power of God. So this new creation, of course, if we had law and Proverbs and all of that applied to the fallen man or the man born in sin, obviously there would be other things that the psychology of the new creation. If you have a new creation with a new heaven and a new earth, it only makes sense you'd have a new psychology in relating to your surroundings. Because if everything's new, if the creature is new, the new heaven, the new earth, if all of that is new, then there is something about this that needs to be the part that lines up with that new creation. It's amazing that regardless of how much you know or don't know, doesn't change who you are, though. And that's one of the most powerful points about the gospel. Somebody could be born into this world and live under the most atrocious of religions and oppression and no joy and no peace, but it actually does not change their identity. That is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. And because it's there regardless of experience. It is there, it is sure, it is very sure, regardless of anybody's experience. So what we're doing is allowing ourselves to look and see what the psychology of the gospel is. As we said earlier, the power of the gospel is not valued in what it adds to your life. You know, all the time I went to church and was involved in Word of Faith movement, it was you do this, this, and this, and you get this, this, and this, and this, and what these doctrines could add to your life.
Even days to your life.
Yes, even add days. It's all addition. But the fact of it is, this is subtraction for multiplication. And once you subtract what doesn't need to be there, everything actually can be multiplied many times over in the heart and the mind. And there's just this pricelessness to your mindset. Now, we have placed a lot of value on a lot of things. We've placed value and identity in what we own, where we are, and who we're with. But this is an identity that becomes sure regardless of those associations. There are parents that once they go to the empty nest syndrome and the kids are gone, they have no identity. They've literally consumed their lives, and their whole identity is made up of who they are in relationship to their children. Once the children are gone, they have no identity. It can be the same way in relationship between husband and wife. I'm not a professional on anybody's relationships, including mine. But the one thing I do know is that if my identity is tied up in the person I'm in relationship with, it's going to be toxic. It's going to be toxic for them. It's going to be toxic for me. So the value of the gospel, because it so separates me from guilt and judgment, then it of course establishes a very powerful identity on the inside of me. If you become nobody when you're not with somebody, your identity has not been established. Let me say that again. If you become nobody unless you're with somebody, it's a sure sign that we need the gospel in our lives. If you become nobody because you're separated from some place, you see, your identity is being drawn from some place. And people absolutely can leave a place, and because of their identity is so strongly connected to a place, they cannot survive mentally and emotionally unless they're back there. At least that's what their mind says. Their mind says, I have no value, I have no worth, I have no ability to survive in a different place, which when you stop and think about it is really stupid. That's not a rational thought. You have just as great ability to survive in one place as you do the other, unless your identity is tied to that place. And if your identity is tied to something, whether it's money or anything else, there's people who, when they go broke, they jump out of buildings because their identity is tied to something. So the question that I'm going to pose to you is this one. I think that many times we use each other as mirrors to try to find our value. I look at you to see what you tell me I am, to find out my identity and my worth. And if my identity and worth, if I don't find something there, I'm going to try harder. Or I'm going to do just the opposite. By damn, if you don't accept me, if you don't approve of me, just watch what I can do. You know, that's kind of like a child that would do something like that. But the fact of it is that no matter how old you get, you can still be a child. You can still be a child. When we begin to grow up and when we begin to mature in the gospel, when I talk about maturing in the gospel, I'm not talking about maturing spiritually. I'm talking about maturing mentally.
Right.
When we begin to grow up, I think that we can begin to go this course alone. You remember part of one of Kate's songs is this is a journey that you have to walk alone. Now, Kate has found that out, and all of us have probably experienced that. That no matter how many people you have around you, you have to walk this journey of identity through the gospel out completely alone. Now, in my case, it was forced alone. I don't know that I was so addicted to what people thought of me that I never could handle being alone. Being by myself was the greatest fear of my life. I did not want to be alone. I couldn't stay in a motel room alone. It was just, I'm telling you, it was devastating to me. And until about 20 years ago was the first time I ever spent a night alone in a place. Now, I never did it. I avoided it at all costs of just being alone. The events in my life then forced me into seclusion, and on every level, with the ministry, with finances, with family, everything put me in a position to where I was alone. Now, the thing that was shocking about that to me is, of course, I was growing and understanding the gospel more, but I got to the point to where that being alone was precious to me. It's like that. There was something. It's something. I was falling in love with this whole thing of being alone. So, what I want to ask you guys is.
I'm going to get you some water, but you've got some.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I do have some. I want to ask you guys about your particular story, and just take into consideration. I want to try to get to hear from you guys, and I want to hear what this has been like as far as finding your identity separate from any person, place, or thing. Was your identity tied to someone and what they thought of you? Was it tied to everybody? Did you use people as a mirror to find your worth? Was it tied to a place? Was it tied to anything? And I want to talk about this psychology of the gospel, because I believe that this is where this powerful gospel takes us. If you go through the scriptures, you'll find that the most powerful thing that happened to the people who were elect, as far as God chose them to portray this entire gospel story, there was always a very severe "you are alone." I mean, they were forced into exile. They were. I mean, it's just amazing the journey that was completely alone, completely and totally alone. And so I want you guys to talk about that. And who wants to start first? Oh, I thought you were saying you wanted to start.
No, I do.
Oh, okay.
But I have to wait.
Oh,
Changing out batteries. We're having some battery issues here.
oh, okay.